I'm Austinlugo.
I'm Andrew Hart,
This is With Nothing to Say.
and let's talk about the umbrellas of Cherbourg.
So, in short, how would you describe this movie, Andrew?
It's kind of a French new wavy, sung through musical movie about love lost, I guess you could say. Directed, of course, by Jacques Demy, which I didn't realize, this is kind of a thing he did with musicals. Like, he had a couple other musical movies. This is the first Demy movie I've seen. I haven't seen like every great French New Wave film, but I've seen a couple. And it seems like he came on the backside of the French New Wave movement. Of course, he was married to Agnes Varda. And just talking about Demy, in terms of what I know about him in the movie, he just seems kind of influenced by many different things.
I think we should start by talking about the opening credits scene, which it's one of my favorite opening credits scene. It opens up on this establishing shot of like this small town in France, I assume, and they tilt down to basically
Bird's eye view.
Yeah, like a bird's eye view of like a pavement or like a path or
Sidewalk, yeah.
a sidewalk. And the opening sequence is people with umbrellas like walking along, and then like left or right or like above or below is the actual titles. I love it. It's beautiful and it's fun, and it's an interesting way to kind of like. And I think this is something. Well, it is traditional with the French New Wave, which is they take these established ideas. So like the established idea of a establishing shot, and then they kind of invert it. So the establishing shot ends up becoming the title sequence itself. I don't know. I love it.
Yeah, it's a fun credit sequence.
So then we open up on Guy working in the mechanic shop, and basically his day's over. He just like finished his last job for the day, and he's going to see Genevieve. And something that's typical of both Jacques Demy and the New Wave is the style of editing that they use. And this is actually, I would say, inspired by, say, some of the work of the 30s and 40s, and even a little bit in some of Orson Welles' work, is these like really long shots where the blocking is really well established. So like on that opening shot in the garage, it like pushes in and it goes to a close up, and then we pull out to a wide, and it kind of pushes back in. That's something that happens throughout the film, which is just these very long, and I guess it's typical of a musical too, which is they don't, or at least musicals back in the from the 40s and 50s, although this came out in the mid 60s, right?
Yeah, 1964.
But it's definitely sort of following in that pattern of these really long established takes with very well thought out blocking.
Yeah, you're totally correct. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, throughout the movie, it's just every long shot has layers to it, I guess you could say. So it kind of almost has like 2 or 3 layers, zooming in and zooming out, kind of, or not really zooming, you know what I mean, like coming in and coming out to a shot. So yeah, the camera is moving a lot. Nothing like crazy. It's more like kind of going back and forth, and it's really just like, yeah, like I said, like the camera just moves side to side or like forward or back. But it's very effective. It works really well.
It's simple, but I think it works in its simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
So Guy goes into like the locker room, and he's kind of
for some reason has like a locker room. I thought that was kind of funny. I'm guessing that's like a European thing or a French thing or something.
Yeah. And they're just kind of like all joking around, and that's when you're introduced to the character of Genevieve. He like in his locker, there's like a picture of Genevieve, and he and her are going to see.
Didn't they say they're going to an opera?
Yeah, they're going to an opera.
And then I think shortly after that, you're introduced to Genevieve,
mm-hmm.
who is working in her mom's little umbrella shop. You know, Genevieve, I don't think she hates it there, but she doesn't really necessarily want to be working there forever. And her mom is kind of, very doting, I guess you could say, a very doting mother. Not even like a mean mother. There's nobody in this this movie is interesting because there's nobody in this movie that I would say is nefarious or evil.
Yeah.
So her mom isn't like a comical, like evil mother. She's actually like, kind of nice. She's just very doting. you also with Guy, you're introduced with the fact that he lives like in a little apartment with his dying aunt
Hmm.
or godmother. So yeah, aunt, godmother,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So yeah, this is where Guy is. He's like a mechanic, like gas station clerk. He lives with his dying aunt who has a care named Madeline,
mhm.
and Genevieve is 17, and she works at her mom's umbrella shop. She's very doting, and I think they're struggling a little bit.
Yeah. They're in a bit of debt. Their umbrella shop isn't doing as well as I suppose umbrella shops are supposed to be doing. And Genevieve is just like any other teenage girl. She wants to go out and see the world, and she doesn't want to live
Uh,
with her mother. She's rebellious in a very kind and nice way. It's very. I think this is typical, especially with Jacques Demay's work. He doesn't really believe in sort of evil characters or mean characters. There's a very kind heart to every single character, and it's certainly true in this. There's no character, although like perhaps characters move in different directions that may sadden or are in conflict with each other. It seems that every character genuinely wants the best for every other character, and the mother believes that the future of her daughter is in kind of this umbrella shop and kind of taking over as the owner of the shop. And Genevieve is so in love with Guy that she wants to marry him, which of course the mother is terrified of, partly because Guy is a mechanic and he hasn't served in the military yet, which is something that they had to do in France. Every citizen was required to serve a 2-year term in the military service. And so the mother was equally terrified that either Guy would die, or if he did live, they would kind of live in this sort of terrible poverty. And she sees sort of herself in Genevieve, and she doesn't want the same thing that happened to her to happen to Genevieve.
yeah, and it's apparent too. Like you said, they discovered that they owe like $80,000 in well francs, I guess you could say, in like back taxes or something like that. So they're kind of freaking out and stuff like that. And this is now a good time too to mention, like, we didn't even talk about it, but you described this movie as a musical. I
Mm-hmm.
guess like it's more like an opera where there are no songs.
Mm-hmm.
They just sing through the whole entire movie. So like all the dialogue, even the conversational dialogue, all of it is sung through the whole thing. No one speaks at all. It's just like all singing and stuff like that. And it's fine, I guess. I think I just prefer to listen to a song. You know what I mean? I prefer to hear like a memorable, because besides maybe like a couple of like themes and stuff that play throughout the movie, like instrumental themes, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Like memorable like tunes, something you can like,
Yeah.
you know. I don't think I prefer kind of the sung through thing because you could argue that you don't have to do that, but at the same time, it kind of propels the movie a little bit, and it kind of makes it, I guess, more lively, I guess you could say, than just like people talking. The instrumental is are really good. Of course, they play throughout the entire movie, and I really didn't get too tired of the music itself. It's just the singing like throughout the movie. It doesn't have a very strong effect on me because I don't even think anyone in the movie is like a straight extremely good singer. You know what I mean? They're not really opera singers.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
they're still pretty good. But that's kind of my general thoughts of kind of the sung through musical approach. I think I would just prefer to hear like numbers, quote unquote numbers, or songs.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because in some of so Jacques Demy made a number of musicals, operas, and some of them they are straight. They're like this. They are sung through the whole thing. They're opera esque, but he does have a few that are just they're more like strictly kind of your traditional musicals. So it's not that he doesn't know how to work in both fields, but I agree that having a sort of more musical, having kind of songs or tunes or like dance numbers, even I believe in his neck. I think in the Young Girls of Rochefort, which the actor who plays Genevieve is in that film. She's actually in most of Jacques Demay's work, but she's in that film too, and it actually opens on a musical number.
Catherine Deneuve,
Yeah,
she's in a bunch of movies, yeah.
super famous French
Very good.
actress. She was in a lot of French New Wave films. Yeah, Jean-Luc Godard worked with her. Francois Truffaut worked with her. Louis Malle, a lot of French directors worked with her. But it is. I do think this film could have benefited from at least a couple musical numbers, even if they did sing through the rest. Because like in I believe Young Girls of Rochefort, it might be one of his other films. They sing through the whole thing, but there's also musical numbers, kind of dance numbers. And I think that perhaps grounds it more in a way that this perhaps feels a little ungrounded.
Yeah, it definitely is unique. I don't think I've seen a movie like this, so it definitely sticks out, just in the way that it does it. And like I said, it has its plus and minuses. I just don't know if I prefer it.
So Genevieve realizes or is told by her mother that they owe all of these back taxes and they need to somehow get the money, and they can't just like sell more umbrellas. That's just not an option. And there's this argument between her and her mom to like sell her jewelry, and for some reason like the mom kind of is like, no, I don't want to sell the jewelry.
Yeah,
She's like, that's only for an emergency. And Genevieve, of course, like, well,
I thought this is an emergency. The movie's also funny. I think it's pretty
yeah.
funny too, for the most part. It's not like extremely funny, but it is. There's some good jokes that I liked.
It's a little dry in its humor. Like, it's not like this, it's not like jokes, like a traditional joke, but the situations are a little ridiculous at times. And this is kind of one of them where she's trying to convince her mom to sell the jewelry, and the mom's pushes back for a minute. But eventually she agrees, and they go to some jeweler that I suppose she's bought a lot of jewelry from in the past. And they meet the jeweler and this other jeweler who becomes a sort of love interest.
Roland.
So they meet Roland, and even though the jeweler herself says, well, I can't buy this pearl necklace, I think is the thing she's trying to sell.
Necklace, yeah.
Yeah, because they're like, the market's just not here. We're in a small town. And Roland says, hey, right, I'll take it off your hands. I'll go sell it, and you guys can have the money. And the mom's happy, and the Genevieve's happy, and so Roland basically says that he's going to come back the next day and pick up the jewelry. And while this is happening, Guy is with his aunt, and there's this kind of, and Madeline comes in and is taking care of her, and you can see that Madeline is clearly in love with Guy. Like, it's a very and he's kind of, I mean, he doesn't, I guess he mostly just seems like ignorant to it. It's not like he treats her badly or anything like that. He just is completely unaware. He's so obsessed with Genevieve. It's the only thing he can possibly think of.
And then I think they're waiting. Yeah, they're like waiting in the shop, waiting for him to pick up the necklace or drop off the money or something like that. And Genevieve is like, screw it. I gotta go and see that guy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I think they meet, and I think that's when he confesses to her that he has to go to the military.
He's just been called up or
drafted
or whatever.
And I think he said he was drafted to serve in the Algerian War, so he has to kill Algerians. And I always think of the Battle of Algiers when I think of the Algerian War.
Yeah.
Which the movie's much better than this one, but I digress. But yeah, they're all sad, and they're very, very sad, and they're crying on each other. And I think not too long after they're crying about it, I think like she talks to her mother again about him going to the war.
And before that happens, while Genevieve and Guy are out talking, the mother and Roland meet at the store, and she invites Roland to dinner because it's clear at this point that the mother wants Roland to marry Genevieve because he's this successful jeweler, and he's handsome and just like the whole package of sorts. And so from this point forward, her main goal is to try to marry off Roland and Genevieve.
The first part ends with him leaving to go to serve in the Algerian War. Mm-hmm. And then part 2 happens, which is the absence. He's gone. And pretty much right after he leaves, she discovers that she's pregnant. Like right after. It's like
they had a night of passion.
Right. I forgot about that too. They have sex before he leaves as well. And then in part 2, right away, she's like, Mom, I'm pregnant. Crap. Okay. And fighting to each other and stuff, but right away Genevieve, I think, is worried because Guy is, his replies are sporadic. She feels maybe that something happened to him or he's uninterested. And her mom kind of takes advantage of that, and she kind of tells her pretty much like, yeah, he probably forgot about you. He doesn't like actually love you. And she buys it like right away. And by the way, this is in a period of like 4 months, all the events of part 2, which is crazy, from January to April. So it's like really weird. It's just like so many things happen very quickly, and he's only been gone for 4 months. Well, I don't think that's true. I think he's been gone like
and Genevieve and Genevieve's mother have this conversation once she tells her she's pregnant. And there is this sort of interesting moment where there's this, they don't say it, but there is this possible suggestion that there are other options other than having the baby, which they don't really get into, but they kind of, they dance around it. And the mother is really isn't so much terrified of the baby being fatherless. She's mostly terrified of what other people will think, the kind of societal errors of it.
Mhm.
And I think that's certainly part of it, but I think deeper down she genuinely does care for Genevieve, and it seems that again she sees herself in Genevieve, and it seems that she was in a sort of similar situation when she was younger, and she's afraid that Genevieve will end up like her mother, so she's even has more reason, as you're saying, to kind of push this Roland her marriage, and that's when the dinner takes place.
Yeah, they have dinner and they eat, and she's distracted, so she like leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And then Roland and the mom are talking, and he basically just like, look, I want to like marry her, and they pretty much, and she's pretty much just like, okay, yeah, let's try to set you guys up. Once again, like no one is evil. No one comes across as like extremely like horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Even the mom and Roland, even though they both like kind of know that like she's in love with the guy, there's nothing that makes me feel like they're nefarious, evildoers. Like it's not like a Romeo and Juliet thing, it's a little bit less, I guess, violent, a little bit less crazier than that.
It's also interesting that Roland's basically only met Genevieve like 2 or 3 times, and he's just like, yeah, I definitely want to marry her. He's all in immediately. And after that conversation, Roland leaves, and the mother comes into the bedroom where Genevieve is, and we realize that Genevieve has kind of been listening to the whole thing.
Yeah,
And it seems at this point she's sort of accepted it.
she's resigned, I guess you could say. Even though it's really, like I said, he hasn't been gone for that long. I think she's just worried that like, well, I guess like I see what she means. I guess I see why she accepted, because she's gonna have a baby, and taking care of a baby is difficult. So it would be nice to have someone there who is able to take care of it monetarily. I don't necessarily like blame her for wanting to do that, especially if I don't know, you feel like the father who's away in another country is not writing to you as much or doesn't have the ability to give you money. So
And again, she's 17 years old, so
yeah, that's true. She's 17 years old. Yeah, I think it's established. Yeah, guy is like 20,
yeah.
and I think the rolling guy must be older, right? He must be like what, like in his 30s or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully like late 20s, early 30s, but his age is never clearly established, but it's somewhere in that age where
But
it's,
once again, that guy isn't like, he doesn't come across as like evil. I think he actually likes her. So it's so weird, but like, yeah, he doesn't. He's not devious.
mm,
He's not like a
mustache
yeah,
twisting.
really villain. Ha ha ha. That's honestly like the second part in a nutshell, pretty much. It's just Genevieve she's upset that Guy isn't there and she's pregnant, and her mom is pushing her towards Roland, and then eventually it happens. That's pretty much how the second part goes. Is that it's kind of this push, pull, and tug of like Genevieve really wants to be with a guy that's actually who she loves, but like she has to think about you know herself and the baby. And, he's gone for 2 whole years. It's a long time, and she doesn't know what to do. So Roland and Genevieve's like, look, I'm gonna be gone to Amsterdam for 3 months. Think about it. Roland returns, and she decides like, okay, I'll do it, and they get married. Although she doesn't seem super happy about it.
Yeah, it's definitely not from her end, it seems to be a marriage of necessity more than it is of love. I mean, she doesn't dislike him, which is nice, but she's at best indifferent to his existence more than anything else.
Yeah, and that's pretty much part two. You get part three in March 1959. Guy has returned. He got home early because he's injured. He mentions that he now walks with a limp because I think he was injured in the war. And he learns that he sees his aunt. He learns that Genevieve has married and doesn't live in Cherbourg anymore. He's unhinged, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
He's having a hard time. He seems angry and depressed,
Hmm.
drinking a lot. He's getting into arguments. He quits his job because he gets into an argument with his boss. He goes to a bar. He spends the night with a prostitute. And then when he gets back, Madeline tells him, like, hey, your aunt died.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that happens
The
pretty
night
quickly.
he sleeps with the prostitute.
Right, right. Yeah, so it's just kind of like, yeah, his life is not going great because, it's, because he's, his best friend, basically his mother figure is dead, and he's upset. And
And the love of his life is married someone else, and he definitely feels abandoned. He seems to be struggling with some sort of PTSD. When he's at the garage, the reason he quits is, a customer complains that, hey, you might have missed something, and
Mhm.
guy gets so furious, like just fed up with everything. He feels like uh, he just goes out and quits, and there's this real sense of loneliness and also isolation. People that were in the military, they often feel very isolated afterwards. They don't feel like anyone's kind of experienced what they experienced, especially with, I suppose, I imagine if he was in Algeria, I imagine his experience wasn't the best experience in the world. And so he's suffering with PTSD. And then on top of that, he loses or he quits his job. So now he's living basically off of his pension. And he sort of goes around looking for other work, but he can't really find anything. He's getting drunk. He
He doesn't
meets
really care. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
just
he doesn't really care. He's not really living his best life. He meets a prostitute who sort of resembles Genevieve, and after they sleep together, we learn that she has the same name as Genevieve, which is kind of this interesting juxtaposition.
kind of weird they have the same name. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, it's just like a thematic thing, and I'm
Okay.
sure it's common enough that I'm not bothered by it. I think it's a nice juxtaposition of these two different characters because Genevieve, the character, is this extremely young, innocent, naive. Even like the way they dress her, it's very, I don't want to say like baby like, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I will say, I believe the actress was 21 when they made the movie. She doesn't. I don't know. She seems like too old to be 17, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
Older than 17 to
yeah.
me.
I agree. She definitely looks older than 17.
She's still good. Like I don't think
Yeah,
she's
I
bad or
mean,
anything.
a great performance. I think it's
Yes,
just and their costuming is just it's very like childish, I guess, almost.
for
For-
sure. Yeah. She's
Especially
yeah.
for like the first, especially in the first part, and less so in the second part, but also the second part too.
Yes.
So guy comes back home after a night of shameful, like he does not feel good about having slept with the prostitute. He feels a lot of shame. He's just down on his luck, and he goes back to his home, and Madeline opens the door and reveals to him that while he was out sleeping with the prostitute, his godmother, aunt, motherly figure, really the only one in his life, has died, which is just what a sucky day for Guy.
And from there, because Madeline is pretty much the only person in that town that he knows or cares about, they kind of start talking a little bit more. They're just kind of talking about their hopes and dreams and stuff. I think Madeline is about to move out, and he's like, "Why don't you just stay and kind of help me, like, I don't know, figure out what I should do, or kind of help me build it up." And during their conversation, I think they both kind of realize right away that like they both kind of like each other. Well, Madeline definitely likes Guy, and Guy, I don't know. I think he might be a little bit ambivalent of Madeline, but I think he still likes her. He doesn't dislike her.
Right.
And Guy kind of confesses his dreams for Madeline about kind of opening a new gas station. So they're kind of talking a while about about what they ought to do, what they should do, and inevitably they kind of decide that they should get married. Which okay. I mean, the other thing, of course, they talk about too is like Madeline's basically the rebound after losing Genevieve. Genevieve is not there. And the other thing too, while Guy was walking around, even the umbrella shop like was sold to someone else and is being turned into something else. So that, of course, is also gone. That part of Genevieve and her mother, and you don't see her mother for the rest of the movie. It's she's gone.
So they talk a while. They decide to get married. They get married. I think it's interesting that dream that he has is the exact same dream that he told Genevieve at the beginning, which kind of shows,
You want to open a gas station.
yeah, he wants to open a gas station and live at the gas station and kind of have kids and have that sort of life, which I think shows to me that Guy sees Madeline in a very similar way that Genevieve sees Roland, which it's more of a marriage of not necessarily necessity, but sort of overlapping what they believe their love, right? She's kind of just Genevieve kind of pushes like her love of Guy onto Roland, and I think Guy does the same thing with Madeline. He basically
Of
pushes.
course. Yeah. It's they're both kind of marrying. Yeah, because a guy like I guess Guy's options is he could help rebuild his life with Madeline, who's a nice girl, or he could just like kind of keep on going on the trajectory that he's going. It's like I guess what do you choose?
Not a great option, I guess.
No, but it's not like Madeline is like his true love. I guess you could say.
Do you think the love between Genevieve and Guy is true?
I guess. Well, I mean, I guess that kind of brings us to the very end part of the movie. So yeah, it's like 4 years later. Guy has it's Christmas Eve. It's snowing, and they're at the gas station. He's got the gas station. He's got it built. He's got his dream going. It appears to be busy. He's got people working for him. They have a small son, Francois, and they're like decorating Christmas tree, and they seem very happy. Everyone seems to be having a really great time, and Madeline, she takes Francois and get him in his sailor outfit. That doesn't like I understand that like it's like a raincoat.
Yeah.
Why did they didn't have like a regular coat for him?
I don't
like,
know.
It's not
Snow is like rain. Snow is rain-esque.
Yeah, but it's gonna be cold. Whatever. So they go see Santa Claus at like the mall or something like that. And then a car pulls in, an expensive looking car pulls into the gas station.
Like a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes or something.
Yeah, like a French equivalent of that, maybe. Yeah. It was nice. Yeah.
And the car ends up being, of course, Genevieve with her daughter, who at this point we know is also Guy's daughter. And so Guy walks out and he sees her, and there's this kind of moment of tension, awkwardness, and she goes into the station with him.
Which, by the way, I don't understand. So, like, she's like, I don't know, the meeting's kind of awkward and weird, I guess. And I guess that's what it's supposed to be. But they see each other. I don't know. I feel like when two people who haven't seen each other for a couple of years meet, there's at least like some camaraderie, like, hi, what I mean? They just kind of stare in each other's eyes. And by the way, like you said, the kid is in the car. And she's like, oh, it's cold. I better go inside. And they both go inside, and she leaves the kid in the car.
That's what I was going to say.
The kid, like, that was so fucking fun. That was so funny how, like, oh, it's so cold. They don't talk for very long, of course. And it is cold. But instead of it being, like, hot, you know what I mean? Like, if you're in a hot car, that would really, like, it kills people. But yeah, I just thought that was so funny. It's just like, I want to leave my stupid kid in the car. Like, whatever. She'll be fine. What?
That was a strange moment. And so she and Guy go inside. And I understand feeling that there should be some camaraderie, but
I get there's like also animosity too, though. I understand. Yeah. There's like weird kind of, vibes. And I understand that.
Weird vibes. And I think, on top of that, when Guy walks out to the car, he sees his daughter there because he knew Genevieve was pregnant. So he knew that this is her. So that must be a pretty intense moment for him. When they're inside the station, Genevieve and Guy, it doesn't necessarily sound like she sought him out, but it does kind of sound like she purposely stopped in Cherbourg to get gas. And it seems...
Yeah, she says, like, this is the first time I've been in Cherbourg since I moved out. Mm-hmm. I had to, she says she had to, like...
She was visiting family?
Yeah, she was, like, visiting family some other place, and then she was driving there from Paris, but she decided to stop in Cherbourg. And she says, like, I wasn't expecting to see you. It's like, well, what else were you doing there, I guess? We don't really get, like, her side very much. She gets married, and then we don't see her until this point.
That's one of the things that's really interesting about this film, is the first two parts of the film are very Genevieve focused and almost entirely from her perspective. But
Yeah,
part three, until the very end, we really don't see Genevieve at all. It's all from Guy's perspective. And I think
yes.
when you see her at the end, I think that makes that whole conversation even more strange. And I think it's interesting that we're not actually seeing it from Genevieve's perspective. We're seeing it from Guy's perspective, because even though we know about the absence, which Guy doesn't know about, we really don't know anything that happened after that. And so when this meeting takes place, there's all of these just sort of unanswered questions and just things that are just kind of left there to not be answered. And I don't think Jacques Demy makes any sort of attempt to try to answer those questions. I don't think he's at all interested in summing up the film in, so many modern, especially American films, where they kind of end, they want like everything to be tied in a bow. I don't think Jacques Demy is all interested in that.
No, not really. But they just kind of talk about like her mother died recently. They talk about that, and they're the kid that they left in the car. I think, and it's discovered that the kid's name is Francois, which earlier in the movie they talked about naming a kid, having a kid, and naming it that.
Mm-hmm.
So he has two kids who have the same name, but they're boy and girl. And I think she says something along the lines of, she's a lot like you. Do you want to see her? And he says, no, I don't want to. I don't want to see my kid. I guess because he really, I guess, I don't know if he's like bitter or he really just legitimately doesn't care. Because it's not really his kid at the end of the day. Really.
Yeah, could be a little both. So Genevieve basically leaves after that,
Yeah,
and
she gets in the car and I think like what she asks, like, are you doing well? And she's like, yes, I'm doing very well. Then they leave, and that's it. It's a very short conversation. They really don't say too much except like what they're doing and how they're doing.
Mhm.
We really learn nothing about her and Roland, if that relationship is going well. They talk about the kid very briefly, like I said. It's a very cold conversation. She leaves, and then Madeline and the kid return, and they play, and then it zooms out, and that's the end of the movie.
Another movie.
It ends a very I don't know, in a kind of sad note, I guess you could say.
It's a really interesting tone. The first time I watched the film, I left the film very sad for like this lost relationship or this thing that never happened. But watching it again, I think there is this certain moroseness that lies under it, but I think there's also a certain sense of hope, especially when he's
Yeah,
talking.
I
Yeah.
think the movie's like emotions and feelings at the end are more complicated than just like, oh, it's sad.
Yes.
And yeah, I kind of like how in the end too, it's like, yeah, you don't really know too much about Genevieve. You almost get the sense that Genevieve like is unhappy, while
Mm.
Guy is doing really well. Like Guy legitimately like comes across as like fine.
Yeah.
He seems entirely happy, and he seems to either have forgotten about Genevieve or just is completely, I don't know, uninterested in her. I think he's uninterested in even talking with her. He doesn't really care. While Genevieve seems more interested in talking to him at that point.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's like a complicated movie, especially in that scene, just because of the collection of things that we do and don't know in both characters. It creates an effect that's very interesting. One thing I forgot to mention: all the rooms are painted one color.
Hmm.
Why does he do that? What's the purpose? I guess it doesn't look bad. It's just like I don't understand.
Well, I think part of it is, and again, this goes back to kind of working off of the work of French New Wave. I mean, this is true in a lot of Jean-Luc Godard's work, less so Francois Truffaut, Louis Malle's work. They, because color became such more affordable in the 1960s, people really started to experiment with color. And I think in this film, and I would say and Jacques Demy is really interested in color in all of his films. And you can see that in the costumes and the rooms. Is it's supposed to reflect how these people are experiencing the world at this time, which it's a little, today it would be a little on the nose, but I think
Yeah,
back in the
yeah,
60s.
yeah. I see. Yeah, I guess that makes more sense. I guess it's better than just the rooms being plain.
So out of 10, what would you rate this film, Andrew?
I wasn't like super crazy about it to be honest. I really, I'm definitely gonna watch more Demi. I think he is like a really good director. One of those. He's like a French New Wave director, but I think his like directing is a little bit more. And this is, for better or for worse. I think his directing is a little bit more focused and more grounded than like a movie like Breathless, which is like all over the place. It's
Yeah.
insane. It's like it's crazy. Demi's a little bit more grounded, but like you said, like he kind of also borrows a lot from it. He has a lot of interesting influences. I just wasn't like super crazy about like the sung through thing. Like I wasn't like it adds to it, but I just wasn't crazy about it. Like I said, I prefer songs, but I think the writing's good. I think the story is nice. When it ends, you know, pretty hard. And I think the way that he tells each of the character stories is also very well done. You know, like you said, where you kind of learn about where it's like kind of like the kind of goes back and forth between the characters and kind of their perspective and what they're dealing with. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty good. I just wasn't super crazy about it. If I had to give it one, I'd give it like a 7 out of 10. But I think I would give it like maybe like a low seven. You know what I mean? Almost a six. But I would say it's just kind of like a good seven. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I just wasn't crazy about every single decision in it.
I still love this film. I think it is a beautiful film. I think Jacques Demy truly is perhaps one of the most underrated directors, especially of the new wave and the 60s. I love all of the performances in this. I do agree that the sort of operatic thing doesn't work as well here as I would say it does in some of his other films. Honestly, it just seems to me that having seen so much of Jacques Demy's work, this just feels a little inexperienced compared to his other films. Like he's still developing sort of the techniques he'll use in his later work. So overall, I'd probably give this film an 8 out of 10. It's different than my original rating. My original rating was a 9 out of 10 when I saw it way back in 2017. But I think some of the things that I fell in love with the first time, I wasn't
Yeah,
so much in love with this time. I was a little more tired because when I'd first seen it, this was the first Jacques Demy film I had seen. Well, not first Jacques Demy film, the first film of his that was operatic, and I'd never seen an operatic film before, so it was very weird and strange and unique to me. And I think Jacques Demy is one of the masters behind the camera. He clearly knows how to block and how to light. His work in color is absolutely beautiful and magnificent, but I think there are some problems with the story, at least for me, that I just wasn't a huge fan of. But overall, I really enjoyed the film, and I'm glad I got to watch it again.
no, it is good. Like it's definitely not bad. It definitely has you know, just kind of that, you know, French new wavy romantic quality to it that it's pretty good.
I'm Austin Lugo. You can find me at Austinlugo12 on Instagram, Twitter, or any other social media platform.
I'm Andrew Harp. You can find me on Twitter, typically at ADHarp24. Thank you for listening to the show. Please consider subscribing to the show or giving it a rating or review.
Until we meet again.